This is John Karp from the 48 Laws of Power podcast. My self-titled debut album is out October 19th and will be on all streaming platforms and available for purchase on iTunes. Go to johncarp.com for more details. That's JONCARP.com. Thank you.
Don't forget about me.
What's going on, everybody? You tune in to the 48 Laws of Power podcast. My name is Rudy Malumba.
And I'm John Karp.
Let's get right into this book. This episode, we're going to do Laws 23 and 24. Law 23 is concentrate your forces. The judgment is conserve your forces and energies by keeping them concentrated at their strongest point. You gain more by finding a rich mine and mining it deeper than by fitting from one shallow mine to another. Intensity defeats extensity every time. When looking for sources of power to elevate you, find the one key patron, the fat cow who will give you milk for a long time to come.
All right, well, Robert Greene gives a good example of this in The Transgression when he talks about the king of Wu who waged war with the northern provinces during the Middle Kingdom period in China. And he basically, spread his forces thin, for lack of a better phrase, to the point that he neglected to pay attention to the state of Yue to the south of him, and they took advantage of his forces being spread out, and they were able to conquer Wu. And then there's also the observance that Robert Greene characterized was with the Rothschilds family. They were a very tight-knit Jewish family, and they made sure that their business didn't extend beyond either their family or their immediate Jewish community. So kind of like what you were saying there, kind of keep the fat, as long as you have that fat cow in the concentrate area, you'll always have something to feed off of.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. This is a very I like this law because, I guess the main definition that I got from this was that, it's better to double down on your strengths. More or less, that's essentially what he's trying to say here. And it has a wide number of applications, really. So by doubling down on your strengths, in general, intensity beats extensity, because when you work really hard at something, when you focus all your energies on one thing as opposed to a bunch of different things, you become stronger at that one thing. And it's much easier to kind of attain power because of your skill in that one aspect. So the applications, I think the first one deals with maybe your skills or your abilities. If you're good at maybe three things, it's better to double down and just get better at that one thing. And then, now you'll be more, you'll be in a better position. People will depend on you more if you're good at that one skill, and you become more invaluable. But it also, the applications also extend to maybe organizations, or like in the case of the Wu dynasty, maybe even a kingdom. The more you spread the more you spread your forces thin, then you might get bum rushed one area. There might be people who invade in another area because you have more space to control, that you're not on top of everything. So. But I think it also, like in a more modern context, it also extends to, if you're a boss, you own a company or something like that. Sometimes it's people will advise you to keep a smaller company so you have your eyes on everything. I think the bigger the company gets and the more you kind of outsource work, the less control you have on it. So, people could start kind of maybe having bad habits. This way, maybe people might not do the kind of work you want them to do in a certain way if you don't have your eyes on it. I think it also works in terms of goals. And I think, Robert Greene talked a little bit about it in this, in the chapter also, was about how if you have a goal, and you just double down on that goal, you don't forget it every single day, and you kind of do something actionable every day, you'll be able to achieve that goal even quicker. So all in all, I think essentially what he's trying to say is to double down on your strengths and just be more, work with more intensity as opposed to extensity.
Yeah, well, I think it's also kind of a warning about getting too big too fast. Also, definitely in a historical context, one of the reasons why the Roman Empire fell is because it spread itself very big and it had lots of enemies at the gates. The bigger, and it's kind of a general rule for empires, is that in a lot of cases, in order for an empire to survive, it has to expand its borders. Because of the high population. You need more resources to keep that population going and keep that empire thriving. But it comes with the cost that the bigger your borders are, is a lot harder to defend. And you're also gonna have a lot of competitors who want to take a piece of the action, so to speak. So I think it's also kind of a cautionary tale about how quickly you should expand your borders. And I mentioned empire, but I think in a modern context, like what you said, business is that would be like the modern equivalent to that. You see a lot of big businesses that buy a bunch of properties and or shares in a different company or whatever. And a lot of times you'll see this company get bigger and bigger and bigger, and all of a sudden they just drop their stocks and everything. And what ends up happening is because they took on so much debt acquiring all these other acquisitions from other companies or intellectual property rights or whatever, that they didn't get a payout of it, or didn't these acquisitions they acquired didn't it didn't give them the payout that they wanted. And so they took out all this needless debt, and now they're trying to have to pay this debt off with money that they don't have coming in. And this is the death knell for a lot of companies. It's part of what happened with Toys R Us, actually. In a way, that's which recently we went under this past summer. Although they're going to try and make a comeback, supposedly. Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, it's hard to say what form it's going to take. I don't know. I don't know how promising it is because they still have the same CEO. But I don't know.
I think all in all, I think the most direct example that we've talked about for a little bit just now is the business kind of aspect of it, and just how I think in general, just that I can think of, a lot of the organizations that have really strong reputations come because they do a certain thing very well. Now that you do have kind of your bigger companies that are kind of jacks of all trades or whatever it is, but I think in general, if you took a survey of the most profitable businesses and the most kind of respected businesses, you'll tend to find that they have they have a bunch of experts at one particular thing. There's actually Ray Dalio. He's a financial guy and he has his own company. He's actually talked at length about. He started his business back in like the 60s, and they've been going on for, since then, been very profitable. They're actually one of the most profitable businesses in the country. And yeah, he said he never wanted to have more than 20 employees. And that was actually part of, why they've been so successful for years. And I think in general, you'll tend to find a lot of companies like that. Obviously, there's also a lot of, bigger companies that are thriving and successful. But this is definitely kind of a trait, or it's a law that I haven't seen. I haven't seen the other way. I guess a lot the other way.
Yeah. Well, I think like what Ray Dalio is saying, he'd rather have just 20 employees. I think that touches on another point. Like, the bigger something gets, the harder it is to manage. Just like the Roman Empire, the bigger it gets, it's a lot harder to manage it, and
you have less control over
you do have a lot less control, because it's a lot easier just to get 20 people to do something. It's a lot more. It's a different animal when you got like 200 people you have to manage.
Absolutely.
And that's the challenge that big companies face, is you're having, hundreds of employees to manage, each individual with their own goals and, what they want to accomplish as well. In a lot of cases, many of these employees working for your company is just a step for them into something else.
Yeah.
So this is especially true if it's a big company. You're not going to have that kind of that loyalty, so to speak, because
kind of unity of focus.
Exactly. Yeah, because they're trying to, the bigger it is, it's not like, being a salesman for Amazon is that big of a deal.
Yeah.
If 1,000 other people are also salesmen for Amazon.
Absolutely.
But if you're a salesman for a much more exclusive company, that's a much bigger deal. So someone who is a salesman for that exclusive company is going to take more pride in working for that company than if they're, working for Amazon or like Walmart or whatever.
Absolutely.
Because it's like, well, I want to one day get to that exclusive company instead.
Yeah.
And the other point I was going to bring up was when I was talking about the companies making acquisitions of either part or entire whole companies. A lot of times, if you're a big company, you're going to do that. You kind of want to stick in the industry that you're in. Right, so Hershey's, for example, most everyone, particularly North America, knows Hershey's chocolate. But I don't think people in this country realize just how big Hershey's really is.
Yeah.
But they're not like Yamaha, for example, that they make instruments and motors. Like musical instruments and motors, like two completely separate things, right?
Yeah.
Hershey's sticks with, chocolates and like snack foods and stuff like that, Absolutely. Right? The only reason that Yamaha is just a unique case of a large company that has its hands in different things, and in fact, I would say probably a majority of companies are not like Yamaha.
Yeah.
Most companies are really good at one thing.
I didn't even know they did motors.
Oh, really?
So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. They're known for their motorcycles and marine engines and stuff like that.
Okay.
As much as they're known for their musical instruments.
Okay.
Musical instruments is how they really got started.
Yeah.
But that's also a case where the Yamaha engine company is really a separate company from the Yamaha instrument maker company.
It's like a different division.
Yeah, they're really like two companies fused together.
Exactly, yeah.
So that's how they make it work.
Yeah.
But most companies don't function that way.
Yeah.
It's in some companies either, they try to get their hands in everything and they fall, and very few are successful, and then others like Disney somehow manage to find a way to connect very seemingly disparate things into one thing, but there's always still that Disney brand around it.
Yeah.
So it's all coming from the same place anyway.
Yeah. I think GE is kind of the same way too, where they're from what I understand, they kind of work together with NBC and Universal. Like Universal does more music and record label kind of music publishing kind of work, and NBC's television, and GE, they make toasters, but it's kind of like what you were saying, where it's not necessarily one company doing everything. It's a bunch of different companies in one kind of put together. And that kind of leads to really the application of this law anyways, because you have different departments that do certain things well. And so within that big company, you have a bunch of people who are experts in what, in what they do, and you put them all together, you kind of have a bigger company. I think like if we're talking to Ray Dalio, and let's say he did want to expand his company, what he would have to do then is kind of bring some people aboard that, he would have to delegate the work and everything like that, but the people who would be in charge of that are the people who kind of share that unity of focus, where they're experts at what they do, they're good at what they do, so you only do that, and we kind of work together, kind of like I guess legs of a centipede all together. So everyone's kind of focused on their one task, and together everything works together. So in general, I feel like in terms of organizations, this law is always being used, because you won't find a lot of people, professional people, that are great at a lot of things, but you will find I mean, that's kind of reserved for like the geniuses and all that. But you will find like a few people you'll find most people who are really, really good at one thing, and that's their value.
Well, I mean, even the geniuses, I think they're only geniuses in whatever their specific field. I mean, Einstein was a fantastic astrophysicist, but he may not have been that good of a cook or mechanic, right?
yeah, that's
But
true.
you have to have a cook and a mechanic.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, as well as astrophysicists, otherwise you don't have much of a society.
Yeah,
What's the astrophysicist going to eat and drive to work, right?
that's true.
And what's the guy who's working on the mechanics going to think about?
Yeah, absolutely.
or to cook, whichever. Well, I think that's how society. That's the only reason why any society is successful is there's the workload is spread out.
Yeah.
If everybody was just doing everything, nothing would get done.
100%.
And it's no wonder that human beings function in societies, because it's a survival thing for human beings.
Yeah.
We're the only creature, or I think, we're the organism that has the longest period of time spending with their parents than any other organism, and that's because our parents pass on their knowledge to us. And the reason why we spend more time with our parents than anything else is because our survival ability is predicated completely on our ability to acquire knowledge, because we have to make clothing to bear the elements. We have to, we don't have claws, so we have to make tools to, hunt and make things. So we have to have someone teach us those things. But at the same time, when we come out of the womb, we can't come out of the womb knowing all these things, because in actuality, we wouldn't fit through the pelvic girdle of our mother. So we have to come out with like kind of softer brains.
Yeah.
We have to be looked after, and then gradually acquire these skills from not just our parents, but our extended family and our little society as a whole.
Absolutely.
And that's how we've evolved as a species, and that's how we function in our society. We don't expect everyone to be good at everything.
Yeah.
But we each kind of find our little niche, and we go for that, and that's what we contribute to the society.
Absolutely.
That's why we're a very successful species.
I feel like this law is, in my opinion, very foundational, also very important. And I also feel like as a fan of Robert Greene, I feel like there's definitely a bunch of themes that come up through all his books, really, because he did spend quite a bit of time talking about, kind of really expanding on this law a little bit in the book he wrote entitled Mastery, where he just talks about the process for you to become a master at what it is that you do, where it really ties in people's kind of the process of you becoming a master at something starts with kind of your natural inclinations and you growing up and kind of figuring that out. So I just I find it kind of interesting that he wrote that book maybe, I don't know, like 16 years after he wrote this. So it's interesting to kind of find those through lines and everything. But he spends quite a bit of time talking about this law too in that book. So if you're interested, definitely pick that up for more clarification about this. But in general, I feel like this law is very foundational, and and has lots of applications. And I feel like it's it's definitely a law that I feel like everyone should use, in terms of kind of organizational skills, in terms of, just your skills or your hobbies, when you're trying to actualize your goals. So I'm definitely behind it.
All right, well, let's jump into reversal then.
Sounds good. For the reversal, Greene talks about how sometimes dispersion is actually the way to go, as opposed to kind of focusing on one thing, concentrating your forces. The examples he used was in terms of war, in terms of combat. If you're actually facing an opponent that's much stronger than you, then it instead of, because if they know what your strength is, they'll come. Since they're stronger than you, they'll kind of zero in on that. But in those cases, when you're the weaker party, sometimes it's good to, I guess, dissolve within the scenery, kind of be a little bit more dissipated, so they don't know where to strike first. Another example you talked about was in terms of kind of your craft, or if you're an artist or something like that. Sometimes it's important to have a lot of different interests, or else you'll become very boring. And the example that he kind of had about that was Leonardo da Vinci. Da Vinci was he was really interested in a lot of different things. While he was an artist at heart, he also knew a lot about biology, chemistry, all the different sciences, and that's actually what made him a very great artist. But Green also says that in some cases, that there's definitely a few exceptions. Like Leonardo da Vinci was more or less an exception as someone who was able to master a lot of different things. The general public, it's we usually just master one or two or a few things in general. So
yeah, I think this reversal brings up a interesting point. It's always that constant battle of, do I specialize or do I generalize?
Yeah,
I think everybody always has to hit that balance. Mm-hmm. I find when you're trying to start something, like for me, I've found this starting my music career, I've had to basically generalize in a lot of different things. Like I had to learn however many instruments I needed to learn to make the album I wanted. I had to learn how to sing. I had to learn how to write lyrics in a compelling way. I had to learn how to record this. I had to learn all this stuff, right? Because it's very difficult, if even feasible, to find however many people to do this in a timely way.
Absolutely.
Right. And however, my ambition is to grow in my field and find others to take on some of these other tasks, so I'm not so overburdened, because it is a lot to do for one person. And that's kind of that's a typical experience for anybody who's starting any kind of a venture, a business venture, an artistic venture, whatever it might be. A lot of times they're the ones, if they're running a business, they're the ones that are doing the bookkeeping, making the product, cleaning the shop, speaking with the customers or whatever. But eventually they're able to grow, and they can bring on more people to kind of lessen the load on them.
Absolutely.
And also too, like Leonardo da Vinci, I always tell people, I feel like there's always this, people are like, well, I'm left-brained, I'm right-brained, I'm more logic-centered, I'm more creative-centered. Why not be both?
Yeah.
I mean, why not be a car mechanic that reads philosophy?
Yeah.
Why not? Why not be a businessman that likes to play lacrosse as well? Why, why not be this intellectual bore that also is a surfer? Yeah. I mean, it's just, why not? Life is meant to be lived, so try out a lot of things. Just don't exhaust yourself, I guess, would be my advice.
Yeah. I think I'm kind of referencing a little bit of mastery along with this law specifically, just because there's so much overlap. But in that book, something that Green mentioned a lot was that generalizing is kind of something you have to do earlier when you're trying to in general, you kind of have your natural inclinations that push you towards a certain subject or something like that. But when you're kind of starting out, before you have like a mentor or someone who guides you through things, you kind of have to generalize and get to a certain point where you start kind of having some sort of value. And once you do, then, like a mentor might seek you out, and you might start helping that person out. And it'll be more in a situation where you'll actually zero in on that one thing you want to do. So like in your case, as a musician, when you're kind of starting out and you're still trying to, figure things out and become better, I feel like once you generalize and you do all those things and you get really good at them, at some point people are going to start noticing you. And when they notice you, then, you'll find that there's more people maybe to collaborate with, or more people to do some of the grunt work. And that leaves you at a position where you can focus exclusively on the one thing that was pushing you towards, your one natural inclination. So, whether that's playing guitar, singing, piano, etc. But he definitely talked about how important it is to kind of generalize early until you get up to a certain point, so you can be of value to someone else. And I kind of, another point that he had in there was about how everything you learn is useful. You know what I mean? So, like the mechanic who reads philosophy could maybe someday, write some sort of, I don't know what he could do, but that philosophy that he's learning could actually be something that helps. I don't know. It's the thing that he talked about in that book. He pointed to, when you're early, you're kind of starting out, to kind of embrace everything and to learn as much as you can about everything, and just to not put a barrier on stuff. And all those things that you do learn are going to help you when you're in a position to just, kind of exclusively specialize. So I kind of feel like it's, it's still kind of following this law, and you don't, but it is also being open to different things, but just the better you get at something, the more and the more value you can bring to other people, the more you'll be in a position to just exclusively specialize in that thing you're doing.
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely, because you can draw comparisons from each thing that you're exposing yourself to.
Yeah, and you'll be a lot more, you'll be kind of at a higher wavelength in terms of your the knowledge that you have of that thing. So, you'll just be kind of, you'll know more than the regular person, so you'll be even more kind of enlightened on that thing.
You'll live a fuller life.
Yeah.
Let's be honest.
Absolutely.
All right. Law 24.
All right. Law 24.
Politics, so to speak.
Absolutely.
Before I jump into this, though, I'm curious, Rudy. I don't know about you, but I've never been a fan of court society, ever.
I haven't either.
From what I've gleaned from it. I mean, it's not something we see in the modern world so much anymore, but I remember, learning about it and just always thinking like, wow, this is really dumb.
Yeah, definitely. And it just seems, all the representations that I've seen of it in the past, it just, I don't know, man. It seems kind of corny. It seems like everyone's being fake with each other all the time.
I suppose
the dress is silly.
Yeah, I suppose we still have elements of this in the upper echelons of society.
Yeah.
And these, big political parties that I'm never invited to.
These Illuminati parties.
Oh, yeah, those ones. Well, anyway, so, however, that being said, though, after reading this chapter, I always try to keep an open mind to things that I don't necessarily value or agree with, because you never know, you might get something of value from it.
Absolutely.
And I have to say, reading through this, there's definitely some things that are valuable in anyone's life.
I think so.
And so let's go through this with an open mind. Number 1, avoid ostentation. So in other words, don't prattle on about yourself. Modesty is a virtue, kind of like when we talked about law 4.
Law 4, always say less than necessary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know about you, man, but there's nothing worse than a know-it-all.
Someone who just talks a lot about what they do and talks a lot about how great they are. And I kind of feel like, just kind of, since we're just discussing the laws of power in general, power is very kind of an interdependent kind of thing, where it relates to you and other people. So if you're someone who just talks a lot about you and you have no real kind of social intelligence for the other person, then you kind of lose power in standing with everyone else, because you're too busy about your, talking about how great you are and your issues and things like that.
Yeah. And I mean, if you keep talking yourself up, you better be able to live up to what you're saying about yourself. Yeah. Because if you don't, then you lose pretty much all credibility.
Yeah, and I feel like even if you do live up to it, you won't be really, not necessarily liked, but you won't even, maybe you could be respected, but I feel like you don't really attain as much power as you would if you kind of had exercised a little bit more social intelligence.
Well, I agree with you, yeah, because you kind of just become annoying.
Yeah,
And people don't want to be around annoying people.
absolutely.
It's just the law of the universe, man.
Yeah, definitely.
Practice nonchalance. Do not seem to be working too hard for something. I gotta say, the most impressive plays you see in football, right, are like the plays when the player just like catches the ball and goes into the end zone like it was nothing.
Yeah.
Like what they say, like, oh, you make this look so easy, right?
Yeah, definitely.
That kind of a thing.
Yeah, and I feel like there's a law in here that we're going to talk about a little bit later where the law is pretty much saying whenever you do something, try to hide how hard it is, or try to hide the amount of force you're exerting on yourself, because you kind of you seem like you're more than human by making something difficult look easy.
Definitely. And it just makes you look cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then number 3, be frugal with flattery. Over flattery can get annoying and raise suspicion. So kind of like in Law 21, remember the law that says to catch a sucker, play a sucker.
Yeah.
Right. If you remember when I was talking about when somebody goes up to you, and especially if they barely know you, they just keep building you up, saying like, oh, you're smart, or you got great taste, or whatever. You should probably avoid that person, because they're probably trying to pull one over on you.
Absolutely.
That's kind of what this reminds me of. Like, if you flatter someone too much, they're going to grow suspicious of you.
Definitely. Especially, that's actually one of the reasons why something a con man will say to you as they're trying to con you is, oh, you look like a smart guy, or you'll, they'll kind of put you in a position where you feel like, yeah, I am smart. So they're appealing to your ego, appealing to kind of your vanity. And I feel like people who are a little bit smarter pick up on that, and they go, why is this person flattering me like this? He probably wants something from me.
Yeah, definitely. And then let's see here. Oh yes, number 4, arrange to be noticed. It is still important to be noticed, just don't be obnoxious. So in other words, it's not like you want to avoid being noticed, but I guess what I'm trying to say is, put yourself out there, but don't be like number 1.
Yeah.
Or what I talked about with avoid ostentation.
Yeah.
Right. You don't want to go on and on and on about yourself.
Absolutely.
But you also don't want to be forgotten, right? You want to be noticed.
Yeah. So there's that delicate balance that you kind of have to do.
Basically, it's like Law 6. We talked about this in Law 6.
Law 6, where you want to be seen. I mean, in order for you to gain power, people have to know about you. But you also can't just be in everyone's face like, oh, I did this, I did that. So you have to kind of be in a position to be seen without you saying anything about yourself. Kind of like there's, I don't know if this is something we've discussed before, but it's kind of more important to for other people to say things for you than for you. Actually, yeah, we did. This was in Law 5 for reputation. Your reputation is important because it kind of precedes you, and it kind of acts like your hype man. So it's better for other people to say things for you than for you to say it yourself. So that's kind of what I feel like this is getting at, where there's that delicate balance between you being seen without you being, being in everyone's face. You have to kind of find a way to do that.
Yeah, it gives you more credibility if someone talks you up than if you do. That's why you get letters of recommendation.
Exactly.
When you're applying to a position.
And it's also not believable. You could say anything. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
You could, I'm the king of France, but, I mean, someone else has to say, oh, yeah, he is.
Yeah.
For people to believe you.
Yeah, the Queen of England's my sister, too.
Yeah.
Kind of thing, yeah. Alter your style and language according to the person you are dealing with. So basically, it is prudent to adjust your language according to who you're speaking with. Know your audience. Which I think that's a very good point for a lot of people. Like, just to pull an example from my own life, as some of you could probably tell from the way that I speak, I come from a pretty rural area. But I grew up, around a lot of country type people, let's say.
Country folk.
Many of whom are still my friends, right? But I went off to college, and when I got into the college atmosphere, you know, I learned, you know, a lot of, I guess you could say, big words, you know, very my vocabulary increased, let's put it that way. So, and you know, if I was talking to like my professors, or we were having like a class discussion about something, I couldn't just like slip back into my country talk, right?
Yeah.
Because A, nobody would understand what I was saying, and B, it just doesn't fit. You know, you want to be taken seriously as a student and to be a serious part of the class discussion.
Yeah.
You know, you don't need to be saying things like ain't and all that, right? But when I come back home and I was talking with some of the people that I grew up with, I couldn't speak like I would have spoken in a college classroom either, because again, they wouldn't understand what I was saying.
Yeah.
And more importantly too, they would take it offensively if I did, because it'd be like, oh, you're just showing off that you're in college and you're smart and
you
whatever.
think you're better than me? Cause
exactly, that kind of a
went
thing.
to a big city college.
Yeah. Even though that big city college is in Pensacola, but whatever. But so the point I'm trying to make is, you don't want to, in a certain environment, you don't want to come off, you don't want to be talking like you would on the street around the country or whatever, when you're in an environment that basically requires you to come off as a very outstanding person.
Yeah.
But you don't want to be talking like that outstanding person all the time, especially when you go back home, or when you go into a community that doesn't have that same kind of high expectation in education, because they might actually become offended by your vocabulary. You know, in other words, they may think that you think that they're better than they are for whatever reason.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I mean, I think this is it's also a throwback to Law 19, which deals with, know who you're dealing with. I think it's very important to be aware of what someone's maybe insecurities, or kind of their sense of vanity when you're talking to them. Because, I mean, you might not even know you're doing it on purpose, and you might actually appear like someone who's, using big words, and if the person is insecure about that, then they'll react in a certain way. So you kind of want to minimize as much conflict as possible by kind of appealing to their whatever insecurities they may have or not. This is also points to how important social intelligence is, and just kind of trying to think inside someone else's head, and just kind of be aware of what their hangups might be, and then responding to that.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's kind of what, that's kind of what this.
That's a good point too. Like, pay attention on what, we talked about this when we talked about don't offend the wrong person.
Yeah.
Actually.
Well, 19. Yeah.
Yeah. And also too, well, you don't. It's cool to curse around your friends and all that, but don't be doing that in front of your grandma. Generally speaking, kind of a thing. Yeah. Or when you hop on the radio or whatever.
Yeah. all the rules around that.
Yeah. Rudy and I both have worked in radio, and I always had to sit by the dump button in case somebody decided to drop the F-bomb.
You have to be quick too.
You have to be fast. They'll sneak up on you. Okay. And then never be the bearer of bad news. Self-explanatory. Not exactly realistic sometimes. Bad news is needed if it reflects the reality of a situation.
Yeah.
If you're complaining, though, that's a whole other matter. That should be avoided. Exactly the kind of thing that makes well, I kind of just reading from my notes here. Yeah. I was just about to say exactly the kind of thing that makes court life kind of stupid, which I agree.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you have to tell the truth.
Yeah.
Sometimes you got to address the elephant that's in the room.
Absolutely.
But I would say that if you're incessantly complaining, and nothing's going to be done by you complaining, then why are you complaining? You're
Exactly.
just bringing everyone else down.
You're bringing everyone else down, and you're not changing anything by
Yeah.
just complaining. Yeah.
But if something needs to be said, don't dance around it like they would in the court world or in courtly life. Address the issue if it needs to be addressed, but if it really doesn't need to be, then just let it go.
I feel like this, and I get where this comes from. It's essentially saying like no one likes someone that always has bad news. You know what I mean? And so I get that, because your natural thing is to say, like, if someone brings bad news one day, you already have it in your head that this person is kind of the harbinger of doom or whatever. And if they do it again, you'll think that. So now you'll always tie this person to that. So I get where it comes from. I kind of feel like it is also important to be honest when you're in a situation where there's bad news and there's nothing I could do about it. So it's kind of, if it's something within the scope of what you can change or what you can't change. But if you do have bad news and there's the capability for you to change that, I feel like that's important too. That way you can say, hey, look, this thing happened, but I resolved it in this way. So, if we're kind of relating court life to modern life, I feel like if you're someone that can kind of bring about that kind of value, then, it's a good way to kind of bypass this not being the bearer of bad news.
Yeah. We all have that person at work or God forbid in our family that just has absolutely nothing good to say about anything.
Absolutely.
They're usually very political.
Yeah. And usually very political. And of course, Law 10 tells us to kind of avoid those people as well, especially if they're always bringing around bad news or they're always, in a way kind of sabotaging themselves.
Well, and it's one thing to vent, I guess, but there's got to be a limit to the amount of venting you do.
Definitely.
Because otherwise people just don't take you seriously.
Yeah,
that's what it comes down to. Never affect friendliness and intimacy with your master. So in other words, don't be too chummy with those in positions above you. It could be unprofessional and kind of demeaning to them if you think of them as their friend rather than their superior.
Yeah.
I'd say this depends on the person.
Yeah.
I've been chummy with some of my superiors and it's been just fine.
Yeah.
Others I wouldn't, because it's like, whatever.
yeah, definitely.
Usually I only become, usually when I've been friendly with like bosses or whatever, it's because this boss and I had a lot in common and we just kind of naturally got along.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't like, what I'm saying? Like I never went out of my way to become friends with a boss. It was just
I never did too.
You kind of get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, if you just happen to both share commonalities.
If there's some sort of commonalities and you're on some level you're comfortable around them.
Yeah.
Then it's like, you kind of share, you can kind of share some sort of, kind of friendly relationship.
Yeah.
On some level. I kind of feel like the thinking about the master student relationship or like a mentor kind of student relationship, while on some level it is good to be cordial and kind of have some like a kind of an underlying friendly relationship, I feel like the simple fact that the person's your master kind of dictates also more kind of parental kind of conversation or relationship too.
Yeah.
That I think Green would say has to be respected if you're for the master's sense of vanity or the master's kind of sense of ego, I guess. You know what I mean?
Well, I think as long as you can, as long as, I guess when you put it this way, don't let your friendliness with your boss, don't let that get in the way of the fact that they are still your boss.
Yeah.
Right? Like, if you think you can get away with doing whatever because you're friends with the boss, like, do not think that at all.
Absolutely.
Don't let that relationship get in the way of what needs to be done, and don't forget that person still is your boss.
Yeah.
I think that's really the idea. Because like I said, I've been friends with my bosses before, but I didn't forget who was in charge.
Yeah.
Absolutely. When I was working as a cashier, hey, you know what? It's cool that I get along with my manager or whatever, but I can't just be taking a nap behind the cash stand. I still got to be doing that. And
just because you're friends doesn't, if you do something like that, they'll, you obviously won't have as much value as you did before. So, that could violate the friendship.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, yeah. Cause then, on the boss's side, they could be like, come on, man, I need you to do this.
Yeah.
It's that kind of a thing, in my case, I never had that issue, but I could definitely see that being an issue for especially a younger person.
Yeah.
Who's maybe just got their first job or whatever.
Yep.
They haven't figured out that there's boundaries to be had at work. It's like having a significant other at work.
Yeah.
It's the same kind of thing. You can do it, but understand that, when you're at work, you're at work. If you guys want to hang out and have a beer afterwards, it's a different thing.
That's kind of a different. Yeah. I feel like the main thing here is because what Green talks about in Law 1 essentially means you being of service to your master. You know what I mean? So, you kind of making your master look good. I feel like that's more or less what Law 1 points to. Because if you don't make him look good, you kind of have no value. So like in order for you to get what you want out of that relationship, which would mean, I guess, some, for you to get better at some skill or for you to just get good at whatever craft that you're doing, you have to kind of satisfy that. So everything above that, if there's some sort of relationship, I feel like that's where what this is born of, pretty much. Just don't overstep that requirement.
Yeah,
I guess. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And understand your place and where your friendly relationship begins and ends.
Absolutely.
Understand the boundaries. All right. Never kind of tying into what we've been talking about. Never criticize those above you directly. It generally does not work out for you. Although it may be necessary to sometimes criticize your superior's actions, but if you must do that, do so politely. Mm-hmm. Which is true. If you're working for somebody, it's really not prudent of you to crap on them.
Yeah, absolutely.
So to speak. Although we all do it when the boss is away.
Some more than others.
Yeah. That's kind of self-explanatory, I think.
I think it relates to the previous one too, and Law 1, kind of that. I feel like that's the other side of the never affect friendliness and intimacy with your master.
That's true. Yeah, because you know what? You could either be friends with your boss, or you could hate your boss.
You could hate your boss. Exactly.
Doesn't matter. He's still your boss.
So if you constantly criticize him, it's the same kind of thing. It's like, this person isn't really offering me value. So what use are they then?
Yeah.
And since you're in a lower position than them, you're the one that kind of gets the raw end of the deal.
Yeah, because they can fire you.
Absolutely.
Especially if you're in a right to work state like here in Florida, they can fire you without just cause.
Absolutely.
And whatever they want. And it's just, again, you can despise your boss all you want, but when you're around them, do what needs to be done.
Absolutely.
And I'm not saying you should just, bend over and take it in the ass. But what I'm saying is that, it's beneficial for you to do that, because if presumably you're at a job because you either need the money or you're wanting to move up in your career or whatever.
Absolutely.
So what good does it do to piss off the person that's essentially providing you that work that you need?
Definitely.
There's no advantage of you, blatantly crapping on your boss in front of them.
Absolutely.
Just wait till you get home and talk to your dog about it or something. I don't know.
Yeah, and also being in that position gives you the opportunity to kind of build up the, to kind of build your humility up and kind of put you in a position where when you are on the other side of that, when you're the master now, you'll be even more composed, and you'll have a kind of broader understanding of what it takes to get to that point. And I feel like that's something that Green talked about in Law 1 too, and that important. So the process of you being, kind of essentially on the bottom, and you dealing and putting up with people with kind of, big egos and things like that is actually helping you. So you, when you're in their position, to not be that way.
Yeah, you're learning from their inability to be a good boss.
Absolutely.
Let's see. Be frugal in asking those above you for favors. So someone who constantly asks for favors is annoying and is less likely to be helped. Also, don't ask favors for a friend. That person can contact your supervisor. So that's a really good point. Number one, kind of what we've been talking about with superiors. You don't want to be asking all these favors from your superiors over time, because that's gonna wear them down after a while, and they'll be like, okay, I don't know what your deal is, but can't keep having you do this. And have you ever run into this where if somebody wanted to talk to their supervisor about something that bothered them, but they didn't want to actually confront that supervisor, so they were like, hey, can you ask so and so?
Yeah, I've been in that position.
I hate that.
Yeah, I don't like it either.
I don't do it.
Yeah, I don't do it either. Yeah,
I go, listen. I tell that person, listen, if you got a problem with something, you need to address it, not me.
Yeah.
Which is true, because the reason why that person is doing it is because they're too much of a coward. Let's be upfront.
Yeah.
And B, they're like, well, if it backfires on him and not me.
The fall guy.
Yeah, and I'm not gonna be some person's fall guy.
Yeah, absolutely. And also something that we learned in Law 13 was about how, kind of laying the groundwork for social intelligence, about how when you need help and you want someone to help you, presumably somebody at a higher stature than you need to appeal to their self-interest, because if from the beginning everyone is selfish, then why should they help you? You know what I mean? Like so you kind of have to look at things in that way. So when you're in a position where that person helping you doesn't serve them at all, maybe it's best not to even do, because you don't want to ruin that kind of relationship. So I feel like this I guess semi-law, whatever it is, kind of points to that, where it says that be aware of people's kind of own sense of selfishness, and only appeal to them if they're getting something out of it too. You know what I mean? But if you're not in the position to help them help themselves, then just don't even do it.
Yeah, or at least do it sparingly.
Or do it sparingly. Yeah.
Yeah. Never joke about Never joke about appearances or taste. Always measure the humor of those around you, as jokes about appearance or taste can be hurtful. Which it's true to an extent.
Yeah, that's very true.
At the same time, you have to. It's like knowing your audience. You have to measure that out.
Yeah.
Some people won't mind. I think especially if you're friends with someone, they kind of expect it to a degree.
Yeah.
But yeah, some people are very sensitive about that.
It's also, goes back to Law 19, knowing who to, know who you're dealing with. I guess.
Exactly.
There's certain people that won't take it. There's some certain people that will take it, but then will hold it against you kind of in the long term.
Yeah.
So, unless that's something you consistently do, it's best to just stay away from it. Unless you really have like a deep relationship with the person that you're joking around with, and they know how you mean it and all that other stuff. But in a situation where you don't really know what kind of person the person is, it's best to probably stay away from it.
Yeah,
I'm joking about something like like your appearance and your taste. Those are very kind of basic. Like someone kind of has a big ego, or their sense of vanity is really high, then they're gonna take offense to that.
Definitely,
you don't want to go around doing that.
Although football teams always seem to be an exception to that.
Oh yeah.
Like if you see someone walk in with a Patriot shirt on, at least for me, that's like free game.
Oh yeah. they're yeah. That's the exception.
Well,
or like a Bills jersey or
yeah,
Jets
or
jersey.
Jets,
I'm sure.
yeah. But yeah, it's one of those things, man. But
I
it's,
think that works for me too. Yeah, if I see someone with a Cowboys jersey, it's a wrap. You know what I mean? I'll
Yeah.
make fun of everything.
that's right, because you like the Redskins.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's. But you know what? But when people wear a team jersey like that, everyone knows to expect that. And
Absolutely.
And also too, it's has it ever been meant in a really bad way?
Yeah, I don't think ever. I mean,
No.
usually you don't really know the person, and so you're
Exactly.
just looking for anything that they have on them.
Just to start a conversation or whatever.
And there's some people who really get upset about football teams.
You-
I don't
get
see
it
it
either.
as that big of a deal.
It's a game, guys.
Yeah.
Chill.
You'll find some people though who really take offense to that.
Some people, and I tell you what, if
Live
you find
for it.
someone who's that offensive, you should offended by just a little,
Just a football jersey.
good natured fun
Yeah.
about football, then just stay away from that person. I mean, come on, that's part of the game,
Yeah.
Whatever. Do not be the court cynic. An expression of wonder and an expression of wonder and admiration is always more welcome than a sharp criticism. Well, that's definitely true. Like, there's nothing worse than when you go to like a magic show,
Yeah.
and you're like, you see this one person, they're like, the rabbit's in the right sleeve, right?
Or it's a magnet.
Yeah,
He's doing this.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, like,
There's always that guy.
I mean, of course you know that it's
yeah.
not magic, but
course.
you want to be caught up in the illusion
Want to
of
be
it.
swept away.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like it's, I don't know, in my opinion, I feel like this being a court cynic is very similar to which one is it? Never criticizing those above or being the bearer of bad news. I feel like it's related because you know what? No, I don't think it's as related as I thought it was. I think I was thinking of the next one. No, I think that one, in my opinion, is very self-explanatory.
I think it is related, actually.
To the being a bearer of bad news.
Yeah, because think about it. All you're doing is pointing out. You're just criticizing. It's the same thing.
Okay, yeah.
It's kind of like
it invokes the same feelings.
Yeah.
That the other one did. Yeah.
I think it is very. I think they're almost identical.
Yeah.
I mean, they're different insofar as, like, if you keep bringing up bad news, that's different than if you're pointing out the fault in, like, some painting that someone bought recently.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's one of those things where it's like, yeah, yes, it's true. Maybe Miss Henderson does have a very large hammer toe, but you don't just let that go.
Yeah,
right?
let it go.
You don't need to. You don't have to say, like, flip flops weren't made for people like you, Miss Henderson.
Yeah.
Keep that to yourself. I don't know
Good
why
joke,
that
though.
came into my mind, but
Oh
it's one of those things.
yeah, definitely.
Be self-observant. It is important to reflect on yourself. You can listen to what others say about you, but this is often unreliable. That's so true.
Yep. I feel like it's very self. I feel like it's something that's very kind of self-evident. Also, I feel like this is a reflection of social intelligence. Also, again, like I said before, Green talks a lot about how power is it's kind of interdependent. So it's not just about you. It doesn't exist in a vacuum. You need other people in order for this power structure to exist. So, if you a good way to kind of exercise that is by thinking in terms of other people, thinking about what other people think about and how. So this really, kind of points to you being aware of how you look in terms of other people and adjusting that,
Yeah, and also it's kind of saying, be open to criticism, not hurtful criticism like Miss Henderson's hammer toe.
Yeah.
But
Something you can't change.
So, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But, like, constructive criticism, be open to it. Don't run away from criticism just because it's, just because someone has maybe pointed out a flaw that you haven't noticed.
Yeah.
Embrace that and try to incorporate that into improving yourself. At the same time, as Taylor Swift says, some haters are going to hate.
Haters gonna hate.
Yeah, some people are just gonna.
You just have to shake it off. You know?
Oh God, master your emotions. Well, that's pretty much enough said. No one likes an overly emotional person. That's so true.
I think that's easier said than done, though. You know.
Well, it is easier said than done. I didn't say that. I just
Yeah.
said, enough said. Master your emotions.
Absolutely. Yeah.
If you're, you got to keep your composure. If you get overly emotional, either if you're angry all the time, you start like punching holes in the drywall. People are gonna avoid you like the plague.
Yeah.
If you're always crying because, like, I don't know, some guy or girl dumped you.
Yeah.
That's pathetic, and people are gonna avoid you. You have to keep your emotions in check. It's not saying that you have to be unemotional.
Yeah.
It's just that you have to keep your emotions under control.
Yeah.
And that also gives you a lot more stability and a lot of clarity of mind.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing worse than a decision made out of a rash emotion.
Definitely.
Right?
Definitely. Yeah, and we've definitely discussed this in other laws too, where we talked about not committing to anyone and kind of staying above the noise. Kind of, I forgot exactly what queen that was, but there's she was in a situation where she had to appease a bunch of different nations, so they all kind of went into they were all in conflict with one another, but she had to not get involved in that conflict, kind of be above that, and just figure out what her kind of best interest was. There's also another law called find every man's thumbscrew, which is really kind of a way to manipulate the situation whenever you're dealing with someone who's emotional. Whenever you see that maybe this certain thing affects this person a certain way, this certain aspect of this person gets them out of character. So a good way to defend against that is by not showing your cards in those situations. If there is something that affects you in a certain way, you have to find a way to master that, and not kind of show that, so people won't manipulate you in that way. So, mastering your emotions, when you're dealing with other people who are out to manipulate you, is something that you definitely have to do, and kind of just being in control of that. Yeah. And also, if you're out for your best interest, you can't get swept up in other people's problems, so that's another application.
Absolutely. Fit the spirit of the times. Now, this one I have to say I don't entirely agree with. I think it's good to be relevant,
Yeah.
stay up to date on certain things. But, at the same time, I really do value when people maintain their independence. My high school band director used to say, cool marches on.
Mm-hmm.
There was a time when I was a kid that having a mullet and wearing mom jeans was cool. But
when was that? I don't even think
it's the 90s, dude.
Oh, okay, early 90s.
Early 90s,
yeah. Billy Ray Cyrus, I think he had a mullet back in the day.
Yeah, I did too, unfortunately. But it's one of those things where it's like, if I were to go back in time, I wouldn't get a mullet.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it can be something as silly as that, but also too, on a more serious side, there was a time where it was fashionable in Germany to wear swastikas and hate Jews as well.
Mm-hmm. Well.
And the thing is, just because everyone else around you is doing something doesn't make it right.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And that's a very extreme example, of course, but I guess what I'm saying is, you don't have to compromise your tastes to fit in, right?
Yeah.
But you especially should not compromise your morality to fit in either.
Yeah.
That's what I'd have to say.
Yeah,
about that.
I think I agree with you on that. It's interesting because I feel like all these little sub laws and these little elements here kind of relate directly to how court life was, I guess, back then and stuff.
Yeah.
And I think, especially with it, because I had the same, I kind of felt the same way when I was kind of reviewing this material, but I kind of feel like it's this element specifically kind of relates to just kind of how brutal and how ruthless people were back then, where it literally, like, anything that you do that kind of violates, the king's or whoever is in charge's sense of like vanity, or violates something that they kind of hold dear in a certain way, could get you beheaded.
Yeah.
And I feel like this specifically, this fit in with the spirit of the times thing. I think that relates directly to that, and I don't think it's as relevant nowadays. I feel like there's, I mean,
Oh, I think it is. I think it's still relevant. Yeah, because sometimes you have to kind of go along with things in order to function in society. Let's take this for example. Let's say we just recently had this Brett Kavanaugh thing go through.
Yeah.
If you're someone in the entertainment industry, for example, which is highly liberal, let's just say that, and you think that Kavanaugh was innocent, right, the entire time, you might want to keep that to yourself.
Yeah.
Because especially if you're an actor and your work is contingent on others giving you a job, you might want to keep that to yourself right now, because that is not the popular opinion in the liberal circle, and especially in the Hollywood liberal circle.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that you can't maintain your beliefs. Frankly, people should be able to speak how they want, but that's not how the world works.
Yeah.
People will use your political beliefs against you. So if you're someone who's like that, just keep it to yourself. That's all. That's all I would say.
Yeah.
It's not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
Now, I tell you what, well, I guess what I'm saying is, like, if people in the U.S. all of a sudden got the wild hair up their butt and decided that they were gonna, I don't know, commit mass genocide on people with green eyes, I'd say no, don't go along with that. Resist that.
Yeah.
There's like levels of
there's kind of a line you draw. Where you can actually where you can go with things and kind of, if something completely violates your sense of your sense of integrity, or just how you feel strongly about something, then you don't do it. Something that you deem as kind of being objectively right versus objectively wrong.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Whereas, like, yeah, exactly. Like, stand up for what you believe in terms of objectively right or wrong things.
Yeah. Or just picking your battles too.
Well, that's what, that's a probably more streamlined way of putting it.
Absolutely.
Like, does it really matter if people know how you feel about the Brett Kavanaugh incident? It really doesn't.
Absolutely.
You may as well just keep it to yourself and keep your job.
Yeah. Very true. Very true.
At the same time, it does matter if your society decides to descend into an episode of genocide.
Yeah.
So,
definitely.
Again, pick your battles kind of a thing. And then, let's see, the last one, be a source of pleasure. People prefer to be around those who give the pleasure. If you're not a pleasant person, fake it till you make it.
Yeah. And this was actually the one that I was thinking, like, that's kind of almost exactly identical as being the person that never be the bearer of bad news. That kind of sub law. I feel like those are essentially saying the same thing.
It is. It's kind of saying the opposite. It's kind of saying, like, where being the bearer of bad news, don't be a negative Nancy. Instead, be someone that is just pleasurable to be around. Either you're funny or, you just like to just have fun.
Yeah.
People like to be around a fun person.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. It's I kind of tie these two elements to the I forgot exactly what law it is, but people tend to respond more to kind of to how they feel kind of about things. So if you can actually kind of generate a certain feeling about yourself, then people will respond more to that than they would just, you telling them like, oh, I'm a fun person, I'm a this, I'm a that. If you kind of create a sense about you that generates kind of fun and pleasure, then more people will come towards you.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And you can attract people, and you can actually gain quite a lot of power.
Exactly.
Really, because people like the funny guy.
Yeah.
Or girl. Whichever.
There's a saying. The saying is, people remember how you made them feel more than what you say.
Yeah.
And
how I think it's how you made him feel, not what you did.
Yeah.
I think it's something like that. I know what you're referring to.
Yeah. And I feel like it's just, I think it's just in our wiring. I think before we could talk, we had to relate in some way. So we created, kind of a way to communicate more directly. But I feel like when you feel a certain way about a certain person, it's kind of above that. So kind of tapping into that ability to make people feel a certain way is more powerful, and kind of you attain more power that way than just by communicating directly. And there's a lot. It was earlier on that we talked about and everything, but I kind of feel like that's essentially what this is getting at. So
right. Well, I don't think there was a reversal for this one, was there?
There was no reversal for this. And the law that I was thinking of was Law 9, win through your actions and not through argument, which is pretty much just saying, it's better to do something than to argue about it.
Yes,
So
actions speak louder than words.
Actions speak louder than words. And I think in that law we talked a lot about symbols and ways to get your thoughts across that kind of on a higher level, I guess, than just talking it out.
Right.
And I feel like that's kind of what that element went to. In general, there weren't any reversals for this law. I kind of feel like this really kind of put a spotlight on a number of previous laws we talked about and related that to court society. So
it felt like kind of a big review, but also it kind of went in depth a little bit more too. So I think it was a valuable chapter. And if you're suspicious about court life, like I have been, I think it's definitely a chapter I recommend because it'll give you a different outlook.
Definitely.
For sure.
Definitely. And I find it very interesting that Law 24 it comes across like a review law, I guess, because we're at the midpoint of the 48 laws of power.
You're right. Yeah.
So I feel like that's kind of that's interesting. Maybe Robert Greene did that for a reason.
It may very well have been intentional.
Absolutely.
Intentional.
So I guess it'll be interesting if there's these next 24 laws talk about maybe other aspects of human nature that weren't explored much in the first half, but that remains to be seen. That's something we're gonna, I guess, talk about more as we kind of finish up the remaining 24 laws.
All right. Well, I think this concludes.
That should be it. We're at the end for the 48 Laws of Power podcast. My name's Rudy Malumba.
And I'm John Karp.
Signing off. Well, that was our take. What do you think? Email us at the 48 Laws of Power podcast at gmail.com.
Be sure to check us out on iTunes, YouTube, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and like us on Facebook.
Listen in every Monday as we air new episodes.